How does that look? Does that look, Gillian?
Yeah, it looks fine. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're here now, so skip through those first.
Okay, Morena, everybody. Welcome to another AMA online Saturday morning. Thank you very much for coming from the comfort of your living room or wherever you are. We're very happy with you all around the country coming to talk and listen to Fiona and Pania. They are going to introduce themselves in a moment, but just before they do that, I'd like to, as an NZAMP president, I would like to thank all the people who are hosting this session and the ones to come, and the people who do all the work. So because it is a fantastic thing for us to do and to bring us together from all over the country. So thank you very much, and I pass over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Gillian. Tēnā koutou katoa. E mihi ana ahau ki a koutou katoa I runga I ngā āhuatanga o te wā. Ko Fiona taku ingoa. Kei e waipapa taumata rau ahau e mahi ana. He ohonuhu ahau ki te kura akaranga mai te tauwhera tangata. I work at the University of Auckland. And I'm Fiona. And I'll ask Pania to introduce herself in a moment. But we are here, I think, this morning because we were involved in the writing of the refreshed mathematics and statistics curriculum for English medium. And we hope to sort of share some useful things with you if we can. So Pania, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, morena. Tēnā koe Fiona. Ka mihi kia koe, ka mihi kia Gillian. Koutou ko tō tīma, nā koutou I whakariti tēnei koe mo tātou. Me ki pēnei, ko hikurangi te maunga ko wāpu te awa ko Ngāti Porou TV, ko whānau te whānau a pōkai taku hapu, ko pōkai taku wharenui, ko pōkai te marae, ko te kapa hine kōpika taku tūranga waiwai. Ka mahi au ki te kuninga ki Pūrihu Roa, hei kai hautu Māori. Pānia te maro from Ngāti Porou, and I'm working at Massey University in the Institute of Education, and I've been fortunate to work very closely with Fiona, so really looking forward to sharing this time with you all. I didn't expect for there to be so many people, but it's awesome. Thank you for being here. Ana ka hoati te rākau ki a koe, Fiona.
Why, thank you, Pania. All right. So even after all these years of epidemicking and pandemicking, I still don't quite, it still feels really weird presenting on Zoom. So I said before we started that there's a couple of things I think are tricky about talking about the mathematics and statistics curriculum at the moment. One is that we just don't quite know what's happening with some pieces of this because of political changes, and us and our work and you and yours are all very anxious to know what's going to happen. I just want to get on, form a government, make an announcement. I want to know what's happening. I need to sort myself out for next year. And I'm sure many of you feel the same. So I hope that you won't feel too frustrated by some of our answers to your questions this morning. We're going to do our best to answer them in the detail that we have available to us. And the second thing is that I know that on this call, there will be some people who have had the time and energy and interest to engage really strongly with the materials that are available. And some of you who might be coming along this morning thinking, I've got to do this next year. I've got to get onto this. I'll go and hear this as kind of an intro. It'll help me find out what everything's about. And it's kind of difficult to cater to both ends of that. So I apologize in advance if some of the stuff is the material that you've already heard about or know about. I'm sure, especially with Pania's insights, there's going to be some new things for you to think about in the mix as well. So we said we'd like to answer your questions. We did get some questions, and I am going to try and answer those as we go through. And we're also going to try and raise some questions and things to think about as you start to engage with this curriculum document in your work. So the whakata. I wanted to begin with te mātai aho, because this whakapapa framework for the curriculum is tempting just to dive straight into the maths document and talk about the stuff. and it's the stuff that we have to teach and engage with every day. But it does sit at the moment pretty strongly within this whakapapa framework, and it does have implications for how we pick up and use the document and how we think about what we do with it with our students. And when I sent this set of slides down to Pania to add hers to it, it came back with these fantastic questions that she's raised about some of these kind of taken for granted things. And I realized that I'd kind of made almost like a, I don't know, ministry advertisement PowerPoint, you know, first we do this and then we do that. Here's this. So I thought what I would do is I would say a few sentences about this, and then I'm going to ask Pania to sort of raise some questions to get you thinking about this in some more depth. So I hope, as I say, it's hard to know whether you've engaged with this much or whether you've gone straight to the maths document, but the actual maths document lives down here in this strand area. That's where this kind of traditional curriculum statements live. And you can see that there's a huge amount going on around it. And the idea is we start here at the top, looking towards the horizon, and we ground our thinking in place. We think about the young people that we're bringing the learning to. And a lot of the talk, a lot of the stuff in this refresh is focusing on progression rather than necessarily the focus that we have had on outcomes and levels of achievement. Now, that particular piece may be about to bite the dust, because we know that the policy rhetoric of the people who are working to form a government at the moment is about bringing back more achievement-oriented data collection. And so the focus on progression may change, but there it is at the moment. And all these things then place our mathematics and statistics document inside this whakapapa, and goes on to say, well, if you know that, what are you going to do with it? So how are you going to take action, and how is that going to fit with your local people and local area? So that's what I believe the intention of Te Mātai is. But I'm going to invite Pania to sort of have a bit of a kōrero about this. If that's all right, Pania.
Ai, kia ora. So we were fortunate enough to have 2 days of PLD on Te Mātai Aho in Whakatane. And one of the things when I look at something like this is, well, why has this become something that exists now? It hasn't been like this before. Why has it emerged now? And then when I look at the wording in there, I always prompt myself to think about what's its real purpose. How do different cultural and ethnic groups interpret each of the principles in it? Because coming from my background of schooling in New Zealand, the principles seem to be common sense, but is it really business as usual? For example, what does thriving mean? Is it something different to when I was growing up? And I think it is. And do we have to really think about that as something different to what we grew up with? And I think we do. And there's a call to action. And I was just looking at something about pizza this morning. And why has this call to action become one of the po in the Mātai Aho? Is it because of international assessment telling us things that may not necessarily be true? Which, always comes back to our own teaching. And Fiona said something earlier about the worries about the changes and the shifts backwards and forwards. And I keep thinking about ourselves as teachers and where our principles sit and what we want to do for the mokopuna who are in our classrooms or for the students. And I always feel like we just keep doing that good stuff that we do. And for me, it's like, are we looking at these mokopuna and the maths they do as because they're economic bundles or they're human capital for market gain? Do they learn the bodies of knowledge, or do they learn to be performative? And we know we've had these struggles for a while now. I don't think they'll change. It's us that and how we engage that we shift and we move with the tides kind of thing. So the vision for our young people, what is that? How do you build a thriving community based on individualistic competition? Why have literacy and numeracy been deified? What does maths have so so much status? What's the reason for that? And yet so few people become mathematicians. And we don't have enough maths teachers in schools. So these are the sort of questions that always come to my mind. As a person who can do neither literacy or numeracy, are they no longer a worthy person then? According to the way that maths and literacy is being made into crisis, it would seem that they are becoming not worthy if they can't do these things. Is the person who taught them for a year really the one to scapegoat? Is the whānau the scapegoat? Is ITE the scapegoat? Is each sector the scapegoat? So is ethnicity or culture of each child the scapegoat? We keep pointing fingers in the media, and for me it's like, why? So what is this framework being set up to do? Who set it up and why did they set it up? What's the real purpose behind all of that? And I think that comes to each of us personally finding our principled position, no matter which government comes in. So yeah, that was all that I had. My thinking was triggered, and that's all I'm sharing really as I go through with these questions. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to share those thoughts, and yeah, perhaps we can have a really good discussion later about it. You can tell me how off the planet I am. Kia ora, Fiona.
Tēnā koe, Pania. Okay, so this is the whakatauki for mathematics and statistics in English medium. Anō me he whare punga were were. Behold, it's like the web of a spider. And we were very, 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 very excited about this because I think it's not just a kind of piece of window dressing, let's put a whakatauki on the curriculum because that's what we should do thing. It really is something that helps us as teachers to tackle the new document with learners. So there's a real message in here, and it's a message of connection. So we talked a lot during the development about how we often, when you specify mathematics and statistics in a curriculum document, you're often specifying items. It's very hard to specify connections because there are so many connections. So if you pull out, if you think of any particular concept that you maybe really enjoy teaching and think actually how many different parts of mathematics or of statistics is it joined up to? Could it be connected to in terms of enriching learners' understandings of it or how it arose? You know, if you think about an algebra-based view of things or a geometry-based view of things, at some point they've got to come together. I mean, and it gets a bit crazy. So if you tried to make a list in a curriculum of all the connections you need to teach, you'd be going on forever. So eventually we realized that even though we felt that a lot of the recent research literature was telling us that we needed to make sure that people made these connections and saw them and understood them in powerful ways, we couldn't list connections. We had to list things. And so we wanted to build connection right in at the bottom. And so this whakatauki really holds together this idea that when we're looking at what we're going to teach on a day-to-day basis, we need to think about how it is like the web of a spider. How does this fit into the web of ideas that we've identified as important in maths and statistics? So just to point out here I think our area is quite confused in terms, I don't mean you're confused, I mean the area is confusing at the moment because of various policy things. And I won't go on and on saying they might all change because I think you've got that message. But the piece that Pania and I were involved in together was writing the refreshed mathematics and statistics curriculum document for English medium. And that includes the phases of learning, and it's got some progress steps in there in the primary years. Another piece of work that came in over the top of it in response to some international testing results is something called the Literacy, Communication and Mathematics Strategy. Quite a confused document, lots of different language, the language around what's about sort of numeracy, maths and stats, all those things, that gets quite confusing in there. And those again are things that we can discuss at the end if you like, because I think that's quite an interesting conundrum, the numeracy, mathematics, statistics, what's what thing. But anyway, those two pieces So from that piece, and that's the picture of the cover, we get the common practice model. So that's the sort of supposed to be the how-to pedagogy piece, which Pania was also part of, but I was not. And in there is a thing called the end-to-end pathway for mathematics, which is promised in the document. And we have written an end-to-end pathway, and it's been through all sorts of checks and balances and through lots of people's hands. And it says for each year of schooling from 0 to 10, what students should have a chance to learn, not what they're going to achieve, but what they should be exposed to in order to make good progress through maths and stats. Then it's partly that document, I think, that might be the answer to one of the questions we were posed, which was about how can we make sure that year 8 students are prepared for secondary mathematics and statistics. So that end-to-end pathway feels like it might be part of a curriculum document because it is a list of kind of stuff to do or stuff to teach, but it actually lives inside the strategy, because the curriculum documents all had to match. So they all had to match across all the different curriculum areas. And so the decision about phases was taken up here somewhere way before we got into the room. So we spent a good 6 months arguing about that. And in the end, the compromise position was we would have this end-to-end pathway. What we were really concerned was that we didn't end up with 4 lists. You know, we've worked between documents for so long in this area. We wanted to have a tidy up. And so it was quite frustrating that we couldn't put all the information into one place, but that's the way it is. You've got to be pragmatic. So those things exist, but these two here that are part of the strategy are on the minister's desk for the new work program. So these ones have not been signed off for use yet. This one has been signed off for use, but not yet gazetted. So there's a different status to the curriculum document at the moment to this CPM and end-to-end pathway document, and who knows what the fate of either of them is. And then, of course, we've got all the changes that have happened in NCEA and the numeracy co-rec and all that other program of work in the secondary space coming in at the top end. So we have worked really hard, and the ministry team actually have worked really, really, really hard. And I don't know whether I should name people or not, but there's one particular person who's managed to hold all those programs of work together for us and make sure that the language is consistent across them, and tried to make sure that it's not actually a too much of a juggling game that things don't match. So we were acutely aware of the pieces that existed, and we were trying to fit them all together. So this is the UKD. And I'm going to speed up a little bit because we'll get to the interesting part if I don't talk too much about the boring bits, but I do want Pania to speak about this slide. So this is all the curriculum areas had to divide what they wanted to teach or thought should be taught and learned into these 3 pieces. And again, we had a long time of arguing about this, because we would come each time, each of us with, oh, I know how to solve this puzzle. We'll put these things in understand, and we'll put these things in know, and put these things in do. Great. And then someone say, oh, you know, I really don't think that's going to work in my context, or that wouldn't work with my school, or, oh, no, I don't think it's like that. I think it's like this. And so the stuff that was in the do column would move to the understand column, and the stuff that it really was quite, you can cut it. I'm sure you can imagine looking at this, and I'm sure you've had to think about it and probably thought about it. What did they do that for? Yeah. It's a long compromise political process, very interesting, but quite frustrating at times. But the fact is that although it seems really logical when you look at this diagram, you think, oh, yes, big ideas, rich context practices, lovely. When you actually think about what we want to do in mathematics and statistics, it's actually quite hard to divide it up like that. So we did think long and hard about what would go in each of those categories, and we do acknowledge that you could have cut this cake a lot of different ways. And I'm going to invite Pania now just to raise some questions that were prompted for her from this slide as well. So
I actually, I had a look at my questions, and if you don't mind, Fiona, sorry to do this.
That's all right.
I'll just leave those questions for
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Yep. Good. All right. Let's move on then. And if I click the right button, we can move on. All right. One I particularly wanted to talk about was what we ended up doing with no, because you'll see in that UKD that no, because the first curriculum off the blocks was social sciences and Aotearoa New Zealand histories, And this works quite well for social science and history. So in social science and history was this idea of context. So, your big idea might be change is constant or something, and then your context for that could be the New Zealand Wars, it could be colonization, it could be the French Revolution, all places where major social change happened. And so knowing the details of those contexts became the knowledge, but that doesn't really work for us. So after quite a lot of toing and froing, we ended up with I know and I know how to. And we weren't allowed to have because, but I want to put because on this slide because it might help you when you're looking at that. In our heads, we had this idea of, well, because I know this thing, I know how to do these things. So the problem for us was that the how to do part, people kept asking us to put it in the do column, but we wanted the do column to be mathematical practices and ways of working. So we didn't want lots of kind of content items in the do column. We wanted them in the knowledge, but they are things that you know how to do as a consequence of knowing something. So we've tried to match them up so that you can see why you know how to do something, like why it's important to know how to do something, what the kind of big knowledge is above that. And we're not saying just teach the big open-ended airy-fairy concept. We're acknowledging that concept is expressed in knowing how to do some stuff. So there's an interplay between those two things always when you're learning in mathematics and statistics, and we've tried to put them both together. And I guess we're kind of hoping that maybe in some cases that's going to be helpful for teachers to see those two things lined up and go, oh, that's why they need to do that because of that. That's why. So it may or may not be useful for you in that way. But that was our thinking. Because I know this, I know how to do that. I've got a couple of quick visuals for you here that are just some metaphors that we were playing around with. There is a really lovely visual coming if the stuff on the desk gets signed off, which is sort of taking the best of both of these models and making something new out of them. But I wanted to show you these just in case. I quite like a diagram or a metaphor to help me think about the pieces. So this one kind of embodies the whakatauki. It's a spider's web. And the idea we were playing around with here was that around the outside, you've got the understands and the student, what the student is bringing. And those are kind of the anchor points for the web. It's sort of what's holding it, framing it around the outside. We've got the do's in the center radiating out towards those different understands. So the do's are kind of, I guess I was going to say animating, but that doesn't really fit in the metaphor, but they're kind of the big structure of the web. They're things we're learning to do. And then we've got our, what we might think of as kind of content areas, or what we used to call strands, in the gaps around the web. And they're connecting to the do's, and they're connecting kind of to each other, and via the do's, they connect to the larger framework. The problem with this one, there's probably lots of problems you can see. The main one for me is that it doesn't look like algebra is connected to space, because they're on different wedges of the web. And obviously, they fundamentally are. We're trying to say everything's interconnected. So although it shows connection, it does also make it look a little bit, and it looks a little bit like one of the do's might just be connected to history. And so that's not quite right, but it might just help you think about the three parts. This is another one that we played around with. So in this one, we've got the strands or content areas down the bottom, and they're kind of the roots of the matter here, coming up through the idea of evolving history, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. And the sort of stem the trunk that's holding it up is the processes that we're using. So we're taking maybe an idea from measurement, and we're bringing it up through a stem where we're investigating with measurement, we're explaining, we're representing, we're connecting, we're generalizing with measurement. And then the flowering of all of that activity will be ideas of understanding change and variation, pattern and structure, logic and reasoning. So it positions those understandings as kind of the fruits or flowers, I guess, of taking the content from the roots, using the do's to process the content and learn it. And then you're going to get these flowering understandings. And on either side of this one, we've got Mātauranga Māori and Mātauranga Mathematics and Statistics as sort of joint po with a bit of a spider's web in the background. So we were trying to have a bob each way. And on getting everything into one diagram, but that's just another way perhaps of thinking about how the three things might be used. There are some things already available, and as I say, some of you may have explored these, some of you may not. So there is a page. Now, has my screen changed, Anne? Yep,
That's fine.
cool. Okay, so this is the page where things are living, the refreshed area. There's guides for getting started. There are these progression in action guides, which we'll have a look at a bit more in a moment. There's stuff to do with planning, templates, examples. There's these content cards, which I think are quite handy. I'll come back to those in a minute. And there are some videos.
Sorry, Fiona.
Hmm?
Sorry, it may not have
hasn't?
changed. We're just looking at a blue rectangle, mathematics and statistics.
Then it has not changed. One moment, caller. It would be good if it did change. And you don't want to see my email inbox. Okay, how am I going to make it do that? Okay, so I'm going to stop and start again on the sharing. My apologies, people, because it's not showing as an option.
You might want to, can you show a tab up on a browser?
I've got the tab open on the browser. Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm not sharing my email box. Okay, now we're right. Okay, so raving again. This is the page. It's got various things. It's got planning examples. It's got quite a lot of videos about the learning in action. So they've made quite a few resources to go with this for you. You may have seen that already. You may not have. If you haven't and you've got some questions, it is worth a browse for your area. These content cards, I think, in particular, are quite useful. This is what the progression in action resource looks like, just quickly, because one of the questions we were asked was about practical examples. So these progression in action resources do have practical examples in them, but I'm going to give another one in a moment. This is year 7 and 8. So it takes a topic, it draws from understand, know, and do, shows how they weave together, then provides the task, how that fits with the understand, know, and do, shows student responses, and kind of uses colors to show the weaving between the understand, know, and do. And so there's one of these for each of the phase levels, and there may be more than one for each of the phase levels. So that is there for you if you're looking for that sort of practical examples or more practical examples. But as I say, I'm going to give one in a moment. So now I'll return to the PowerPoint. Okay, so just a couple of technical points on some of the questions that we were asked. So I sought ministry advice because, of course, we contracted ourselves to the ministry for this task because we thought it was really important, but we're not actually from or of the ministry. So assessment and reporting is a piece that hasn't yet been settled, and obviously it is quite a biggie in terms of differences in education policy. A question was asked about whether the resources were going to be hyperlinked into the curriculum. That hasn't been done yet. And again, because it's not been done yet, it's a piece of work that's up for grabs. There has been some work on NZ Maths, and the support pages that I just showed you have been established. So that's where the current supports are. And as to the levels of achievement and the maths and stats end-to-end sequence, as I've said, this is the standard statement. The caretaker convention applies, so major decisions can't be taken until the new government's formed. So that's just sitting there on the desk. So, however, I can try and give a quick example before I invite Pania to share some more thoughts with you. We were asked for a practical example, and the examples in the progress in action resources are beautiful, and they're really detailed and gorgeous, and people might look at them and go, oh, that's a million miles from what I can do. I'll never be able to do that, or I can't. There's so much to get together. So this is a really simple example, partly also because I'm explaining it on a Zoom call on a Saturday morning. So it's just really, this is not what I'm saying you should plan your whole maths course. I'm just giving a quick example. So I thought about year 7 and 8, and I thought, what's the biggie new thing here? And one of the new things at 7 and 8 is negative numbers. negative numbers and operations on negative numbers is something that students traditionally have quite a lot of trouble with. So I picked that. Now, these little squares that I've got here are copies of those content cards I mentioned. So the ministry have taken each of these I know how-tos and made a separate little card out of them. You can print them and cut them out, and they're quite good for shuffling around and matching up. So if you're trying to plan something out, it would be quite good to sort of cut out the relevant ones and move them around and match them. I found that was quite useful. So I thought about what I know about teaching positive and negative numbers, addition and subtraction from my experience and stuff I've done in the past. And I thought, well, the things that I think that kids find difficult is making sense of what the negative numbers actually are. So where they live on a number line, that they're not actually fractions and they don't live between 0 and 1, and all those sorts of things. And also that they make sense of what it means to add and subtract positive and negative amounts. So, you know, some of it feels counterintuitive unless you understand what's going on. So I thought, okay, well, whatever approach I take needs to address those issues that always come up. So I looked at the do, because that's kind of about practices and approaches. And I thought, okay, one problem is that they don't have a good representation of the situation. They often don't know where to put them on a number line. They can't think of a real life model where it makes sense. So I thought, right, well, representing is going to be kind of important here. And also the other problem is connecting. So because they're connecting to stuff that they already know, and some of it makes sense and some of it doesn't in the context of what they already know, I better be explicit about how to connect it, what's useful from what you already know and what's different, and like getting them to explicitly connect those things so it sticks. So I picked representing and connecting. And then I thought about the big ideas that I was heading towards. One of the obvious ones is that this is patterns and structure. It's about the structure of the number system and patterns. So that's the overall thing I'm trying to get to in the end, is that actually these numbers work in patterned ways, and that fits in with other patterns that we've already noticed and so on. So that's my big idea. But also I thought, well, actually, I know that negative numbers are something that was invented by mathematicians to kind of deal with phenomena they were trying to deal with, and that it was hard for them to work out how they should behave and what they did. And they've got quite a long history. And maybe it would be helpful to think about the human history of how this idea came about, might be a way into understanding how I could help the kids better. So I did a bit of searching around. The content of the slide is irrelevant, but I pretty quickly found something about the history of negative numbers, which turned out to be absolutely fascinating. And I think would be interesting to do. It started with started being written down by Chinese and Indian scholars, and the original conception of it that's here would be really interesting to unpack with kids. And that caused me to think, as I was going past, actually, I don't know if there's a Te Ao Māori perspective on this idea of, this is about sort of debts and fortunes, like what you might owe someone and how you might get it back and all those sorts of things. And so that was a question to me that I would need to follow up to think about, well, not necessarily mathematically, how does this concept appear in Te Ao Māori, but like, is there a, so that's just sitting there as a thing I would need to do. But then I found some activities. I won't spend too long on this, but this one is the idea of hot air balloons. The people turn the cards over. One card is an instruction whether to add or subtract. The other is a positive or negative number. And you go up and down in the balloon. And so we've got a number line representation, but made vertically to get the idea of up and down with the balloon. And when you're putting in the positive numbers, they're puffs of air that make it go up, and the negative numbers are sandbags that make it go down. So they're moving up and down this way. Obviously, it's not a horizontal number line, but it's kind of a start on a representation. So I was thinking about, right, I want to use representations. I want to make connections to what they know already. This game gives a good representation and a language to talk about it. And then this one, which was about consecutive negative numbers and adding and subtracting them, which was obviously what my aim was originally. But this is kind of a patterned way of looking at it. So putting different operations in between the consecutive numbers and finding out what all the totals are. And by the time you've done that, you've actually done a page of integer addition and subtraction, but then saying, can we see any patterns in the solutions? Can that help us predict what it would be for another 4 negative numbers? So that's coming back to my idea of pattern and structure. So that's not just random examples, there's a pattern here to notice. And also my idea about connecting to equations that they've seen before and the ways that numbers have behaved before. So that's kind of bringing together, connecting. It's also another way, obviously, of representing negative numbers using the negative symbol and distinguishing that from the operation of subtraction. So that links to representation as well. So there's a kind of a history bit that was background for me, but could also be introduced to the learners as an activity. And then the things that I then chose to do pushed on representing and connecting, and the big idea of pattern and structure, but we're about how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers. So that's just a really simple example of how using the ideas in the curriculum that understands the knows and the do's can come together to help us make principled choices about what we might ask students to do. So now I'm going to pass over to my wonderful colleague, Pania. Tēnā koe, Pania.
Tēnā no koe, Fiona. Thank you for all of that. That's really backgrounded really beautifully the work that was done, and it was over a long period of time as well. So yeah, we'll see what keeps unfolding as we go along. My presentation, I wasn't too sure how I would approach this, but I thought I'll take you through what we're doing with the Te Rewa Marautanga Pāngaro. So we haven't done a refresh. The whole Māori curriculum has been changed for various reasons, and it's interesting. So I put this slide up as a way to look at what does mathematics in schools, what has it meant, what does it mean, where are we going with it? And I think you can recognize some of those media kind of images, the girl with her head against the blackboard, you know, that attitude towards mathematics, so that, oh no, here we go, I hate this kind of thing that we've done to people over the years. The answers with name the quadrilateral, and one is called Bob and one is called Sam, one's called Tedison, one's called Kate. And you know, that's not wrong. The child actually did name the quadrilaterals, right? But that's not the maths answer. And then maths is a drama queen. It can't seriously have that many problems. And the way that we've always made maths about problems. And so but there's an approach where it's to solve problems. What about if it's to be immersed in situations, and it's to be working on new solutions to something rather than problems? And so our languaging of maths, I think, has taken us down certain pathways. Pathways, that's an interesting Freudian slip. And there's things like, you know, there's that problem, math word problems. If I have 4 pencils, 7 apples, how many pancakes will fit on the roof? Purple, because aliens don't wear hats. And, you know, that's what it can seem like for people when they look at all this blob of words that's supposed to be about maths and problem solving. And the tuna and the giant stepping over land are just instances where that takes me into the next part of the slides that I've put together about why it is that we've approached our maths curriculum the way we have. So this is the joint effort of a lot of you will know Tony Trinick. He's part of the team. We have someone who is a kaitaka wainga, what is that in English? PLD facilitator out in schools up north, and one is an ITE in Māori medium. There's me, ITE in English medium. There we've got a teacher who covers from primary through to the what do you call it? Wharekura. So we couldn't get that many people because there aren't that many of us I think at the moment now, maths PhDs for Māori medium, we have 3. We've just had a new one come on board, so there's 3 of us. But this is what is backgrounding everything that we're doing, and really we're centering the mokopuna, and this is across the whole, every learning area. It's about the mokopuna, how they are learning in the world, because they're our future ancestors. So we're doing this for them and their mokopuna, and we're not actually doing it for maths, if that makes sense. So when I talk to my students, I'd say to them, are you teaching maths or are you teaching people? And that's what's got to come first in the kura. And there's been a really strong message for us that it's about, we've got to make it clear what the dispositions are that we want to poi, to nurture, to grow, so that our mokopuna flourish, as people are able to use mathematics to be critical thinkers about the world around them and what they want to do with and for the world around them, as part of their community. So if we go to the next one, Fiona, this is the diagram that we've created, and it's actually supposed to be a cross-section of the akamatua, so the vine. If you know the story of Tāwhaki in some iwi, but Tāne, who climbs the vine to gain the kete o te mātauranga, the kits of knowledge, and he climbs the main vine. His brother climbs the aka taiapa and gets blown off, so doesn't make it to the tihi o te maunga. So in the middle we've got our mokopuna, and around that mokopuna we've got our main principles, he puna kōrero. So this mokopuna has all the language they need in whatever learning area or whatever situation, whatever context, to be able to communicate with others. And so in maths, it's funny because some people think that that maths is just, I'll go through he ākonga, and the ākonga is the learner. That's the child that knows how to learn, has the metacognitive toolbox to be able to do learning. The tangata is the person who we want them, what are their dispositions as they learn, who are they being, why are they being that? The uri whakaheke is what are they contributing to the future. So the reciprocity is always built into that. You're a mokopuna being fed now to be a uri whakaheke, to be the best ancestor that you can be. People have said to us, oh, but maths just goes in the ākonga bit, and we're going, actually, no, it doesn't. We have maths, we have all the different sorts of languages in maths. And sorry, this is so blurry. When it comes out, it'll be better. All the different languages, all the representations, models, it's symbols. There's so much language. And if anyone knows Tony, you know the work that he's done in the maths register. And ensuring that te reo is always central in mathematics, because how else are they going to be able to really plumb the depths? And that's the part for me that I find, yeah, I'll get onto that. Anyway, this is what we've built. So then you can see those are the things that coming out for the mokopuna. These are the things that come first. They have to be there first. This is our approach to their learning of maths, and the why they're learning maths, the purpose behind it all. That makes it pāngaro. So the maths and stats is a part of pāngaro. Pāngaro is the bigger world that they're doing the maths and stats in. And so they come out to. There's the outside bit that they use to be able to explore their worlds, work in their worlds, work on their worlds. So that's the approach that we've decided on, because for me, the maths and stats stays maths and stats. It doesn't change. The content stuff doesn't change, but the way that we approach it, why we do it, what it's for, is hugely important for our mokopuna. And the work that I've been doing has made it really clear to me, and some of you already know where I'm coming from in this, is that maths has its own specific culture. And people have said, oh, it's culture free, but it does have a culture as far as I'm concerned, because it has its own language. You know that you're talking to a mathematician. You know when you're talking to a maths teacher. You know the kinds of conversations that you'll have, because the language is quite, I'm not going to say specific, but it's a language that's shared. So that is a culture. It has its own rules, which are different to rules like when Fiona was talking about the negative, positive. Of the thing that came to mind for me was, it's a bit like utu. But people think that utu's revenge. Utu's not revenge. That's a part of utu. But utu and reciprocity, and I think, Fiona, you also had already thought about that. But it's different to the use of numbers. It's a bigger thought about the ways that we slide up and down or across and back. And there can be real negative, but we want to move it into the positive. And you could quantify that, but why would you? But you could if you wanted to. And so that's part of why sometimes in maths, it interferes with the mātauranga Māori, because people go, oh, you could quantify that. And it's like, nah, I don't think you should do that, because you're impinging on some really other cultural ways of being. So when we kind of try, I remember, and this is not about the person or anything like that, but I remember the feeling that I got when somebody was quantifying pōhiri. And I just went, oh, no, you could put numbers into pōhiri, you could put spatial concepts, but nah, because there's something in there that is about tikanga and mātauranga that you just don't, why would you quantify that? And then why would you then measure what kids can do in those processes? And then the problem with that is, because math's got this beautiful world where you can follow those rules. They're perfect, they're beautiful. In fractions, they're there. You know exactly what they are, and you can do with them what you do. But then if you then put that cultural sort of way of looking at it onto the pōhiri, and you start quantifying those things, you just made pōhiri something that can't be flexible and flowing and in the moment. So for me, it's very clearly mātauranga Māori, beautiful world, maths, beautiful world. And the other thing I find about when you separate these two things and don't try to make them the same is that then if kids are coming with a worldview, and you look at that worldview and you go, yeah, maths does this, you have to be really deliberate about what you're saying maths does. And for me, that's quite beautiful, because then you have to take the time to unpack the maths rules, to unpack the maths language and the symbols that are being used. So if you're taking the time to do that, then maths is actually getting a better deal as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like that's what's been missing for so long. And that's unpacking the pūrākau that maths is telling. Like a 4 with a line and a 7 underneath, there's a whole pūrākau that goes into those symbols. And sometimes we just do that 4 with the line and the 7, and we put another symbol of a plus, and we put a 5 with a line and a 8, and we go, right, work that out. But we haven't unpacked the story of those symbols. So I'm going off on a tangent. But that's the whole thing about this is the pūrākau. If we say that pūrākau are important in maths, then we'll do them. And that's the approach that we're using for the Te Rewa Marautanga. Next one, please, Fiona. Okay, and what we've got is a bigger group, an ohumatua, who have said, right, these are the things that, so the puna kōrero, the ākunga, tangata, uri whakaheke, and what we've added is the akamatua for mathematics and statistics, pāngaro, the world that we're wrapping mathematics and statistics in. And so we've said, why does pāngaro make a child a puna kōrero? Or what pāngaro will help that child to be a puna kōrero is a better way to put it. And how do they become an awesome learner in pāngaro? What are the things in pāngaro that we put into place so that they're a real critical thinker? They're, their minds are open to engaging, that they're, actually, if we move to the next one, this is where we use the parts of the akamatua. And I'm sorry, it's all in te reo. There's a few translations there. So, but I don't think you need all the detail. I'm just sort of giving you an overview of why we've done what we've done. And are we running out of time? Yeah. So we've broken down each part of that akamatua, and we've actually put across, so the first part, and we've used the mathematics investigation cycle, because for me, the thinking and the processes, that's what makes this Māori. The way that we process things, the way that we work in mathematics, why we're doing it, that's what makes it really Māori. And then, so we've gone from how you find something to investigate, whether it be in context or whether it actually be in mathematics. How do you ask the really good questions? How we've progressed it for teachers to go, teach your children how to ask the best kinds of questions. And that's a Pip Arnold area that, that I've grown my knowledge through Pip's work. How do you plan for that to happen? And then how do you put that into action and reflect on it? That's what comes first for us. That's what we want our teachers. These are the things for our teachers can't be left to chance, because these are the things that haven't been taught. We've gone straight to the content, taught content, and it's been kind of meaningless. It hasn't had anything for our children, our mokopuna, to leverage from. So if the next one, I'll just see what I've got, because I'll wrap up. Yeah, same sort of thing. We progress them through the years, from our 5-year-olds and our babies, where kaiako need to put in a whole lot of work and modelling and demonstration, through to our NCEA ones, where my kaiako and wharekura went, oh, okay, I haven't been getting my kids to come up with the questions. I've been doing all of that and going, oh, and he's actually turned around now, and in his classroom, he's finding that the non-engaged kids are fully engaged. And this is in a short space of time. So he sort of was one way inclined. When he saw this, went, oh, okay, I'm actually going to try this with my kids, and found some really good results. What we've also tacked onto this is our kura, our kaiako, the boards, and the community are all part of these investigations. So we're including everyone in this. And then, what have I got next? Cool. Then, for me, like I said before, the maths doesn't change. So the content, everything's already there. And I refuse to reinvent the wheel. And I've said, do we want to translate all of that content, or we've made the decision to just, it's all there. We've got a lot of resources from years now, years of it, in te reo, and there's resources in English. And the Maths and Stats has taken it to fine-grained detail, the stuff that kaiako couldn't pick up before. And I really celebrate that. Not for that it might be able to be tick box, because we don't want that, but from the big idea to, so what's that tiny little grain that I'm looking at right now is perfect for kura. And a lot of them are doing it already. And there is a compulsory expectation of kura to at least once a year go from a big kaupapa kōkiri, they're calling it, so a huge, purposeful, people might think of it as integrated or thematic. It's just something that's really embedded in the community, and to do the learning from that. Most kura do it all the time anyway. So that's where we're going with our Te Rewa Marautanga Pāngarau. And yeah, so the maths and stats material is hugely useful for us as the material that we'll use when it gets to the content. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't think I've left enough time for discussion.
It's really valuable though, Pania, because I think there's been such a huge amount of amazing thinking in the Māori space that we don't normally have access to in English medium. And whenever I hear you speak about that and I kind of reflect it back into our space and just think about what we're being asked to, like, I think what people think we're being asked to do and what it actually means to do things, just coming at it from a different way, not changing the content of what we're doing. I mean, no, it's not a relief's not the right word, but it's exciting. It just opens up a whole lot of possibilities. So I think we've got a lot to learn from that space. So thank you for sharing that with us, because yeah, otherwise it's not accessible to people. Yeah, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa. That's us, I think. So we'll hand back to AMA